All right, so today we're going to dive into a story that unfolds inside two ancient letters. But trust me, this isn't just some dusty old history lesson. No, this is a really compelling human drama. We're talking a chaotic community, a massive leadership crisis, and some timeless lessons about how we influence and guide each other. So let's unpack how it all went so wrong and what we can learn from it today.
Okay, let's kick things off with a question that gets right to the heart of our story. You know how we tend to think that if someone joins a really good group or a noble cause, their behavior is just going to magically improve? But what if that assumption is just completely wrong?
And this is where it gets really interesting. This quote from our source material just perfectly sets the stage. It points out a surprising truth. Becoming part of something new doesn't automatically make you a better person. And this one single idea, man, it's basically the spark that ignites the entire fire we're going to be exploring.
So that brings us to our case study, this new community in the ancient city of Corinth. You can almost think of it as a big social experiment. And, well, let's just say it was an experiment that proved our opening quote right by going completely off the rails.
See, the thing about the people of Corinth is they already had a reputation around the ancient world, a pretty wild one, actually. And when they decided to form this new community, they didn't just leave all that baggage at the door. Oh no, they brought it right in with them.
And we're not talking about small stuff here. These problems were specific and they were severe. The community was seen as unruly and hard drinking, they were known for sexual promiscuity, and, this is a huge one for our story, they were constantly forming little cliques and picking sides. I mean, these weren't just minor squabbles, these were deep, deep-seated issues.
Now, their founding pastor, this guy named Paul, he wasn't some distant figure who just checked in once in a while. He actually lived with them for a year and a half. He was deeply invested, teaching them the ins and outs of their new faith and how to actually work as a healthy, supportive community. And then he moved on.
And yeah, you probably guessed it. That's when all the trouble really started. Sometime after he left, Paul gets word that things back in Corinth they've completely fallen apart. The factions were back, morals were a mess, and even their gatherings had become these selfish, chaotic scenes.
So how did he respond to all this chaos? Well, he wrote them a letter. And this letter is pretty much a masterclass in what you might call pastoral tough love. And his approach here is so crucial. He didn't disown them. He didn't fly into a rage or kick them out, which he probably could have. Instead, his response was both affectionate and firm. He basically takes them by the hand and patiently goes over all the basics with them again. This wasn't about condemnation, it was about guidance. And his focus wasn't just on scolding them for everything they were doing wrong. No, he tried to redirect their attention back to the core of what they believed. He wanted to help them connect the dots between the big ideas of God's love and how that was supposed to translate into how they loved each other.
So you'd think that would solve everything, right? Problem solved. Well, it didn't. In fact, his firm pastoral letter accidentally created a brand new and much, much deeper problem, a full-blown leadership crisis. The letter was meant to correct their behavior, to get them back on track. But for some of the folks in Corinth, his confident, authoritative tone, it had a completely unexpected and really negative effect. And here's where the whole conflict just totally shifts. Get this. They didn't argue with the substance of what he wrote. They didn't say, hey, your advice is wrong. Instead, they just attacked the messenger. They flat out denied he even had the right to tell them what to do. So they launched this whole series of personal attacks. They claimed he was inconsistent. They questioned his motives for even helping them in the first place. And they challenged his very credentials as a leader. This wasn't a theological debate anymore. This was a direct challenge to his authority.
This whole crisis forced Paul to respond with a second letter, and in the process of defending himself, he ended up laying out this profound vision of leadership that really digs into the critical difference between true authority and just coercive power.
And this gets right to the heart of the issue. Leadership, of course, requires authority, but it is dangerously easy for that authority to slip into coercive power. Just using force to get what you want. And Paul's point is, the moment that shift happens, it damages everyone involved.
So what was his alternative? He lays out this model. First, he says, study the example of Jesus. Second, a leader has to actively avoid using that coercive kind of power. And third, and this is the radical part, a leader's real job is to eventually get out of the way, to empower other people so they can finally stand on their own 2 feet.
Think about that. The ultimate goal of this kind of leadership isn't to make the leader more important or more central. It's actually the complete opposite. It's to make the leader less essential over time so that people can connect with the mission directly without needing to go through you. So what's the legacy of this whole messy affair? I mean, after all that drama, what can we take away? And, more importantly, how does this ancient conflict even speak to us today?
Well, ironically, the Corinthians' many failures turned out to be a cornucopia of blessings for all of us down the line. It was precisely because they were so much trouble that they pushed Paul to write so deeply and so powerfully about the real nature of community and leadership.
And this isn't just for pastors or religious figures. This dynamic of power versus authority, it applies to absolutely anyone in a position of leadership. A parent, a coach, a teacher, a manager, even a president. It is a universal human challenge.
So this ancient story really leaves us with one crucial question, a question that every single modern leader really needs to ask themselves.
And it all comes down to this. When we lead, are we building our own power, or are we helping others stand on their own? The answer to that question, well, it really defines the kind of leader you truly are.